prayed to God to remove my father from our lives. But he was always there. And very soon, I began to wonder if God really was. Some friends of mine gave me a copy of the Qur'an. And then I read through it a third time and a fourth, and then I realized this is something strange going on here. I'm not even a single verse into the story of mankind, and there before me I see my question. That whole question, everything that I ever thought, everything that I ever experienced, everything that I ever knew was in that question.
Sejak Al-Quran pertama kali diturunkan, banyak orang-orang kafir Quraisy meragukannya sebagai firman Allah. Bahkan, mereka menuding Al-Quran adalah ucapan atau karangan Rasulullah.
We obey our fathers. Our children cannot be our teachers.
How can we accept that a man we met in the street yesterday can be some God's prophet today?
Dead bones can live again, he says. Because he who created man can also make man return from the dead, he says.
Penolakan terhadap Al-Quran tidak hanya terjadi pada zaman Rasulullah, bahkan hingga saat ini masih ada orang-orang yang terus mencoba membantah wahyu Allah yang terakhir ini.
In this video, I want to give you 100% proof that the Quran is false. The Quran is not from God.
Salah satu cara unik bagaimana Allah menjaga Al-Quran adalah dengan memberikan kemampuan kepada umat muslim untuk menghafalnya. Ada ribuan bahkan berjutaan hafiz yang tersebar di seluruh penjuru dunia. Dan Allah telah menjadikan Al-Quran sebagai pintu hidayah bagi orang-orang Kristen, Katolik, Hindu, Buddha, Yahudi, dan bahkan Atheis yang sebelumnya menolak keberadaan Tuhan.
In any case, so I became an atheist when I was 16, even though I was going to Catholic school at the time. Declared myself an atheist in one class. It was a confrontation between me and a priest. We were talking about God and the purpose of life.
Kesaksian Jeffry Lang, seorang Profesor Matematika Amerika ini seakan tak pernah bosan untuk disimak. Jeffry Lang mengawali kisah kelamnya di masa kecil. Bagaimana ketakutannya ia menghadapi ayahnya yang kekejamannya seperti iblis neraka. Dan ketakutan terbesarnya adalah bagaimana jika ia kehilangan ibunya yang ia anggap malaikat penolongnya.
My mother certainly played no role in my becoming an atheist. My mother was a wonderful woman, a beautiful lady. She had tremendous dignity and class. The neighbors loved her. She was a registered nurse, and she put in many extra hours at the hospital. She worked in the ward that dealt with dying patients. And when I would come and pick her up late from work at night, not all the patients, but many of the patients would drag me over and talk to me and tell me what a wonderful woman my mother was. When she died, her funeral was packed, and person after person that came up to me had a story to tell about my mother and her goodness. Time and time again, people described her as, Jeff, your mother is a true saint. She was a deeply religious woman, a great mother, a great teacher, a gentle person. She never cursed. I never heard her curse, swore ever in her whole life. Never heard her speak to anybody rudely or speak about anyone rudely. She was a tremendous example of a truly religious person, and she didn't wear it on her sleeve. It was just slowly but surely you could see it just in her day-to-day interactions with people. My father, on the other hand, was a difficult man. My father, for some strange reason, had this tremendous rage inside him. I don't know where he got it. He had this terrible violence inside him. And every night, he would try to quell that violence with hard drinking. And his drinking, though, only made him all the more volatile. Because my father could be laughing and joking one minute, and he could fly into an angry rampage the next for some unexpected reason. You never know what would trigger it. And once he flew into that angry rampage, it would take, he would just go wild in the house would be in havoc, and he would rage on and on and on, and it would take an awful lot of liquor and several hours before he would finally go to sleep. And this would happen night after night after night. And so my four brothers and I was the fourth in line. My four brothers and I lived a frightening and precarious childhood. But I'd have to say the worst of it was watching my father regularly taunt and threaten and abuse my mother. And it would happen day in, day in, day in, day out, night in, night out. And it was a never-ending nightmare. But a far worse fear is the terror that overcomes you when you watch your father go after your mother. Because she's the only source of warmth and kindness, of love and protection that you know. And if he were to take that away, from a little boy's standpoint, then you've lost everything. But the worst guilt of all, and it is by far the very worst, is knowing that you did nothing to stop your father from hurting your mother. And the hate grows and festers inside you. Not only for the man that you call father, but for yourself as well. And so I prayed to God again and again and again to remove my father from our lives. But he was always there, and very soon I began to wonder if God really was. I could not fathom why God would subject my mom to such lifelong punishment. I could not imagine what great sin she must have committed, or that we, her children, must have committed to deserve my father. I didn't have the maturity to sort out such questions, but I had enough fear and anger to provoke them. I was too young to see the wisdom in allowing my mom, to suffer the violence and abuse of my father. I was too young to understand why God would let innocent children tremble night after night after night in their beds, fearing that they might not see their mother the next morning. I was too young to see how the mercy of God could even extend to my father with all his terrible failings. All I could see in my world was chaos and violence and fear, and so it became easy for me to question the existence of God.
Setelah tumbuh dewasa dengan kisah kelamnya, akhirnya ia berhasil memecahkan penyebab semua masalahnya selama ini. Profesor Matematika University of Kansas ini terkejut, ternyata itu semua sudah tertulis di dalam Al-Quran yang ia baca secara tidak sengaja.
Make a long story short, some friends of mine gave me a copy of the Qur'an. And one night I was sitting in Diamond Heights, my apartment in Diamond Heights in San Francisco. I was working that time at the University of San Francisco. I was 27, 28 at that time, I can't remember. And I ran out of stuff to read, and I took this gift that my friends gave me and I began to read it. I opened the Quran, read the first page, then the second, and then very quickly, in the second surah, about 37 verses into the Quran, I came upon the story of mankind. And I have to admit, I read through it very quickly. It was about 9-10 verses long. Story of the first man and woman. And I recognized some of the details. It was similar to what I had learned when I was a child, but I noticed that there was something wrong. It was apparent to me that whoever authored this Quran, of course I wasn't a Muslim at the time, so I didn't have any idea who that was, whoever authored this Quran clearly did not understand the real meaning of the story, because they had obviously gotten the details confused. They didn't even understand the whole purpose of the story. And so I just read through it once, and then I read through it again, just to try to see what kind of point the author was making. And I read through it a third time and a fourth, and then I realized this is something strange going on here. I'm going to read this much more carefully. I'm going to need to go through this story line by line, verse by verse, because it's obvious that the author is trying to bring out another point. And I wasn't quite sure what it was, but definitely he packs a lot of meaning into almost every word. I thought the writer at least seems to have a great measure of brilliance. So I'll try to sort of take you through what my experience was as quickly as I can. So I came to the 30th verse of the second surah, Surah Al-Baqarah, and it began like this. It said, "Behold, your Lord said to the angels, I am going to place a vicegerent on earth. And they said, the angels said, will you place therein one who will spread corruption and shed blood, while we celebrate your praises and glorify your holiness? And God said, he said, truly I know what you do not know. See, that's the verse that hooked me. That's the verse that caught my attention. That's the one that kept on making me read the story again and again and again. Because listen to the way it begins. Behold, your Lord said to the angels, I am going to place a representative of mine on earth, a vicegerent of mine, an emissary, one who acts on my behalf. I thought, that's not the way it goes. You're not supposed to be placing man on the earth in some positive role, some elective office. You place man on earth as a punishment for his sin. Clearly, I knew the author didn't quite get the point. But still, it was an amazing line. But then I come to the next line, and it says, and the angels say, will you place therein one who will spread corruption and shed blood, while we celebrate your praises and glorify you? I looked at it again. I couldn't believe the question. They said, will you place therein one who will spread corruption and shed blood, while we, the angels, celebrate your praises and glorify you? I looked at that and I said, exactly. That would be my question. Why would you create this being, supposedly for some positive role, when he's capable of doing tremendous wrongdoing? When he could spread corruption and shed much blood? Why would you create this violent and pernicious creature when you could create angels? As the angels clearly say, while we, the angels, celebrate your praises and glorify you. They're asking one of the most fundamental questions in the entire history of religion. Why create you, man, this utterly fallible creature, this creature who could rebel against God's will, who could do such tremendous wrongdoing, who could wreak havoc like no other creature on earth, when you can make them angels? And look where the question is being asked. It's being asked in heaven. It's almost like saying, look, why don't you just make them angels and be up here in heaven with us, you know? Why don't you just make them angels, pop them into heaven, he's fine. Why would you put him on earth where he could feel distant from you, where he can work out his worst criminal tendencies, act them out, feeling somehow independent and apart from you and free to do whatever he wants, when you could just make them angels and put them into heaven and make them perfectly submissive to your will? I looked at that question and said, that's my question. I'm not even a single verse into the story of mankind, and there before me I see my question. That whole question, everything that I ever thought, everything that I ever experienced, everything that I ever knew was in that question. It was as if the author took my life and wanted to pick out exactly the right question to humiliate me, to provoke me, to anger me. Why create man, this most destructive and violent creature, when you could make him angels? And then look at the answer. And he said, God said, truly I know what you do not know. You know, in modern parlance, we would say, I know exactly what I'm doing. I read that and said, what? You know what you do not know? You know exactly what you're doing? Well, please inform me. Tell me what you're doing. Because, you know, I'm 28 years old and I haven't figured out it yet. And I have a lot of issues that I'm still dealing with that's connected to this question. You can't just get off that easy. You can't just tell me you know exactly what you're doing. Not after what I've been through. Not after you made me this way. And then I realized, of course, I was arguing with a God I didn't even believe in. And that would happen several times as I read through the Qur'an. And sometimes I would just get into so agitated by what I read, I'd start arguing with this voice that I'm reading before me, that's calling to me.